Chapter 2, Specialize. So we've seen in the last video there are 6 steps to peak performance, and step 1 is specialize. So let's get into what should you be specializing into. So there is this confusion always whether you should be a generalist or a specialist. And this book does a pretty good job by telling us that we should be both. And it introduces this concept of T-shaped leadership or T-shaped skill building, where the horizontal is the breadth of understanding, where you have many skills but it's shallow, and there is one skill that's the vertical skill, which is deep. You have one thing that you are so good at that you can creatively contribute, in that area, like something new. You can come up with something unique that helps solve major problems or come up with new ways of doing things. And that one thing is very important because you can continuously go deep, but you also need to build this collaborative skill sets on your breadth of understanding of those skill sets. So you can work with other people who are, having their own depth of skills. So you need to be able to bridge that between your depth and other people's depth by that horizontal bridge. So do both. Specialize in one area and then generalize across the board where you can relate to some of those other specialties. So now, Malcolm Gladwell has been quoted in this chapter quite a bit, and he says something really interesting. He said it's not just the talent that leads to success. It's not just talent. So if you're really good, doesn't mean that you'll be successful. So once you specialize and you're really good, how do you become successful? Then he said there are 4 other factors needed. The first one, social circumstances. When you grow up, like, what social circumstances are you growing up with? What culture, what values, what rules are made up in your mind that governs your predisposition? So your social circumstances is very important. Second one is, are you able to purposefully practice, meaning use what you have in something that's meaningful and useful? Is it just a hobby, or is it actually like, you relentlessly add it to make that like your core focus, right? So to become successful, you need to have mastery, and that is this piece of relentless and purposeful practice with immense application, right? Like you are like spending those 10,000 hours. Typically, if you spend 3 hours a day, 365 days, you get 1,000 hours. It takes 10 years to build that deep T specialization. That depth of skill will require 10 years. So Michael Phelps, right? Like, look at how much time he has spent swimming, and now he's built that long arms that really help him swim. Similarly, if we build our depth of skill, our brains would evolve. It's like our brain workout, right? As Saurabh Mukherjee says, our brains will grow internally and they can expand. Our neuron connections will grow. So once you have the right social circumstances and you're able to purposefully practice and apply it immensely for, like, let's say 10,000 hours using creative solutions, and you have an environment that supports you, like Bill Gates, right? Like, he was in an environment which he had access to computers. At that time, it was very rare. And at University of Washington, the access he got was the enabling environment that was perfect for a programmer like him to eventually set up a company. But he had the right social circumstances. He did a lot of practice. Like, he was there nonstop for many days, many weeks at a time, and for many years, right? So all of these factors are actually needed. So even if you specialize, if you've gotten that one thing that you're really good at, but there are these other things that are really needed to be successful. And then the question is like, hey, are there like steps to specialization? Let me first specialize. There are these other things that are outside some of these things outside your control, but you can still specialize and you can get a lot of mastery, which is quite helpful in the marketplace today. So Robert Greene's book, Mastery, is used here to come up with 8 steps. The first one is to reflect. It's for you to reflect, like, on your uniqueness. What is your liking? What are your inclinations? And some of these emotions could also be temporary. So that's where these steps will help us to make it more solid of these ideas. Then you need to find a mentor who actually knows you. A mentor is someone who knows you, has the time, because if you find someone who just shallow, has one or two conversations with you, it's not a really good mentor. Who has time for you, who's genuinely interested in you, who has time for you, and who is good at that area, right? And so once you find a good mentor, then they'll actually know you, right? Once they know you, they'll know your emotional and mental and personality makeup, and they'll be able to tell you, what path you should take that'll optimize for you. Then is you take all of that feedback from your mentors and then apply it to an internship or an apprenticeship position where you try out something. Like take that feedback and then try that out. And by that you'll be able to use your creativity. Now you've learned, new skills in that area. You'll be able to attack the old problems with new ways, and you'll be able to learn new skills as well. And so you'll be able to expand your knowledge in that area. And in that process, you'll learn and see how it feels like actually doing the work. And while doing it, you will eventually gain mastery, because you would have repeatedly practiced that craft and you've internalized it. And now your brains can, has made those connections, and you've used it, you have actually internalized it, right? Once that happens, intuition is the next step. It's the step where your brain now recognizes patterns. It not only has the memory and creativity to connect, but it builds that creativity morphs into intuition, where you can see things faster than other people in that area. And that is the basis for your neurons in your brain to click and new ideas to come. But this works as long as you stay in your core competence, right? Like you don't want to be like having the T shape has one skill where you're going deep, so you need to constantly hone in and stay in that lane to compete in that area, because competence without borders is not competence. Another great thing I learned from this chapter. That was great. And so constantly improvising is the next area. And then while you're at that apprenticeship or that internship, you can develop a mental model of like what are the pathways that this can lead me to. Let's say you wanted to do teaching, you could do that on the side, learn like how you feel about it, figure out how you build course materials for it, and then figure out like how would you teach it in the best way. And then you can find out like how can I expand this? Can I do this for 10 years? What would it like? What courses would I do? And then you can build that mental model of like how would your career pan out if you were to do this seriously. And then based on those reflections, and you should probably do many of these apprenticeships, internships if possible, if you're lucky. Not everyone can do that, but let's say you're lucky. Then you can get all of that feedback and then say, hey, I did these 5 internships, I really loved that one for these reasons, I'm going to go pick that, and that's where I'm going to go in depth for building my career and specialize in that area. But like not everyone's really lucky, right? Like this is one thing I didn't really like about this chapter. Like it has a lot of theory in terms of what you could do. It brings a lot of these concepts, but like it doesn't recognize the fact that the audience could be people who are probably stuck at their career, right? And they have tried to do a good job in their videos, the videos on this book with various authors and various people that they have done a case study on, where they've covered this. But like, what if you're stuck in a bad career, right? Like, and then you still want to specialize. So that is not answered in this book, as far as I could tell. I read it twice, but like, so in my mind, from the videos that I saw on this Victory Project book, this idea came in, which was quite useful, could have been added in the next edition of this book, which is moonlighting, which is, can you pivot on the side, right? Like, which is, what if you could on the weekends practice some of these 8 steps, right? That are shared here for a new area. You want to pivot. You're just stuck in a bad career. Then you probably need those 8 steps on the weekends. You can probably do that, and eventually, if you're getting some luck there, then you eventually want to also try out part-time education, like a dedicated degree in that area to really go deep in that area, and then again get guidance, and then eventually pivot. Right? This is a daring proposition, but it's possible. Um, so that is moonlighting, and then the second is, and it's an alternative that is much easier, but not easier relatively, but it still has the path towards mastery, which is figure out, like, in your job, you've given it, you're in a career. Agreed, it may not be the best of what you want to do, but you are already there for a reason. And so what if you could fi- make the best out of it, right? Like, if let's say you're in a career that you don't like, then figure out, like, what areas do you like in that career, right? Like, and then pivoting could be one effort, but you could also really get good at that career by figuring out what areas within your career does interest you, right? Maybe there are some parts where you can really go deep, where you really can become the expert, where everyone looks up to you for advice and answers. So you can really, if you channel your energy and focus on what you already have by getting much better at it, one skill at a time, then you will be recognized, you will feel good about it. There'll be this positive virtuous loop that you can build at your current job, and eventually you'll be so successful in your job that you will eventually have time for moonlighting and doing, something on the side, because you're good at what you do. So being stuck in a bad career, this is something I added based on some of the videos I saw. It's not in the book, but this would be hugely important for you and I who might want to pivot. And so, three questions before I end this, which is a checklist for specialization. Have you found an area of specialization? If not, figure out what sparks your imagination, and then draw a timeline. Like, how are you going to specialize in that area? If you've not yet found your specialization, find out what are your inclination, what are your prioritization. Remember, each one of us has very limited time on this earth. If you count a 30 years career, then you have 200,000 hours. 50 years career, around 400,000 hours, right? So what is it that you want to do with this limited time you have on this earth? How you want to engage? What do you want to contribute? How would you find a way where you would be passionately engaged and happy? And the tool that really helps here is reflection. We're coming to the end of the year. We're starting a new year. Reflection is a really great skill. And in all of this, right, mentors really help. So if you could take one thing out of this, is to find out in an area that you like, connect with someone who's really good in that area. Try to see if you can build a connection with some referral, and then talk to them. Get them to talk to you, understand you, and build that mentee relationship, and then learn from them. I think that is by far the biggest thing that you could do from this, and then use these 8 steps. All right, and so continue to expand, read extensively, and then finally, so reading extensively is most important, right? Like, once you have, if you want to specialize, you want to read extensively. You want to be knowing all aspects of that area. So specialization comes with reading extensively. So that's the 3 questions to ask yourself. If you really internalize and grok this sub chapter, then you want to be doing all of these things. These things I really liked from the book as well, which is like the 2 most important days in your life are, 1, the day that you're born, and then 2, the day that you find out why. Your why is your specialization. And the struggle between what you must do, which is your love, and what you should do, which is, if your career is not your love, it's not your calling, it's a career, it's a job, then that's what you should do. So there's that struggle, and we looked at, if you're stuck in a bad career, what options do we have? And this was the most insightful from this chapter, which is, it is harder to excel if you don't focus on what you must do fully. So at some point, your career should pivot from your should do to must do, and so you would have to map that out, and that is the path to specialization. And again, that is only one bit. Mastery is one bit. There are 4 other areas of success. So this is quite intriguing. At least gets us a roadmap on how to start thinking systematically and build and get a mentor, figuring out how your timelines for your career would work. How would you go and build that specialization? What is that one thing that people would want you to talk to you about in this whole world? And it's possible, if you spend the 10, 20 years doing that one thing so well with guidance from someone who's an expert, you could be the specialist. And it's very, very helpful to be a specialist. See you. Thanks.